Former MLS and USA national team star. He was elected into the National Soccer Hall of Fame in 2006 and now serves as ESPN's main soccer analyst, joining Seth for an exclusive Q&A live on ESPNNewYork.com. Please welcome Alexi Lalas.
The voice of God, ladies and gentlemen. So welcome, man. Have you been, and how excited are you for what's going to be taking place for the next month?
Oh, I'm good. First off, thank you for everybody for spending some time here, and to Roos Chris and everybody that's involved here. This is for soccer people. This is everything. We were talking earlier about how many hours are going to be missed at work because of what's about to happen here this summer. So I am so excited. I leave in about a week for South Africa, and on a personal note, it's incredible, and from a professional perspective, to be able to be with ESPN, because we're blowing it out this summer in a way that people haven't seen the World Cup done. So it's getting pretty exciting. Yeah,
it's going to be. I want to thank our sponsors today, our participating sponsors. For today's Lunch with a Legend, I want to give it up for the folks at Brooklyn Brewery. 100% bottle re-fermentation. Also want to thank the folks of Emblem Health. Where are they? Over there on the side there. And of course, the great folks here at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, especially the wait staff. Can we give it up for these guys? We thought about two things to do, and the way I want to get into this, because a lot of people wanted to come and learn more about you. But I think that given the fact that the World Cup is coming up, and you said that ESPN's making such a big deal about the coverage, it's different than years past, different from when you were playing. Why do you think ESPN is going head over heels the way they are to promote the World Cup?
It's a business, number one, and it's a good business. And if it's a stock, it's certainly one that's going up. I mean, look, John Skipper is a huge supporter of soccer. He loves it as a game, but he also recognizes that this is an opportunity for ESPN to do something special, and it just happens to involve soccer. This is the biggest tournament in the world, the most popular sport in the world, and certainly if ESPN is the worldwide leader, they have to be able to do something like this. And so for soccer folks that have been around for a while, like myself, when there was a time where nobody cared, either on or off the field, to be involved in something like this and to see all the different things that ESPN is bringing to bear for this World Cup, it warms the cockles of my heart. I am so excited to be a part of it, because I think soccer fans certainly are going to get their dose, and it's going to be authentic, and it's going to be relevant to them. But I also think that people that are just coming and understand that it's just a big party and they want to see it are going to be educated and entertained throughout the process, and that's important.
You played in a couple of Olympic games as well. In 92, 96, you did the Olympics, and then of course 94 was the coming out party for yourself, playing for the United States in the World Cup. The difference between the Olympics versus the World Cup?
It's hard, because when I get on a plane and I sit next to someone that knows nothing about soccer, and we're talking about different things, and they find out that I played in the Olympics, there's this ooh and awe factor, and that's just American culture. But for a soccer player to play in a World Cup, it's so much more important and rewarding than an Olympics. And when we grow up in the United States, we think of the Olympics and the USA and all that kind of stuff, and that's just the perception. It's starting to change a little bit, but as proud as I was to represent my country in the Olympics, when I stepped on the field in 1994 for the World Cup as a soccer player, what it meant to me as a soccer player and as an American was just a whole nother level.
It's a fascinating thing. Now, I want to acknowledge there were a couple of things about Alexi in 1994 that burst onto the scene. First of all, you are among the United States soccer's all-time leaders in games played, goals, assists, and points. You had 9 goals, 11 assists, and 29 points. You also had a look.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, you had some long hair. You had a goatee, and I would contend that there were probably more Americans that knew you for the look than any of the great statistics that you accomplished.
I grew up in the 80s, and I grew up in Detroit, and as much as I would love to say that soccer players were people that I grew up watching, it just wasn't part of it. And so I was much more into hockey and to be honest, Def Leppard and Bon Jovi type of stuff. And I recognized very early on the power of hair in the entertainment business. And regardless of the fact that we deal with sports, I believe it is an entertainment business, and that's not dangerous to say. I believe we go out there and people pay money, and you should entertain them. And soccer, I think, for a long time has recognized the power of hair. And in 1994, I look back on it now and I shake my head, but. I looked very, very differently. Since then, I have, cleaned up a little bit on the outside, but still a mess on the inside. You know?
Well, and the interesting part about it is personalities sell any sport. And in this day and age, especially with increased media, do you feel that there are players that have to do outlandish things, that they have to do recognizable things? How does a current soccer player become as well known as you were?
I think there's no template necessarily, but I think you do have to recognize as an American soccer player that your role and your responsibility goes well beyond that 90 minutes when you're on the field. And I think all of us from that generation recognized it. And as it gets more and more popular, maybe that responsibility gets less and less. But I like to feel that regardless of what sport you're involved in, that a willingness to project, a personality and a character, but with an authenticity, I think is important. It's not necessarily wrestling, but it's not a situation where it's not entertainment. Otherwise, we just go out on a Sunday in front of nobody and play the game. And there's certainly an element of that's important, but. I love the pageantry. I love the theater. I love that about sports. I love the characters, both the villains and the heroes. That's what draws me to any sport, let alone soccer. Well,
there's a couple of quickies before we get into the World Cup conversation. Did Diego Maradona really ask for your jersey?
He did, a long time ago. We were playing down in the Copa America way back in 1995, and Diego Maradona is a legend on the field, and for those of you that are watching this summer, there's going to be a huge story because he is leading Argentina now and leading what is going to be widely viewed as a possible heir apparent in Lionel Messi. Back in '95, we actually beat Argentina as the U.S. down in Copa America, and in the post-game party, it was amazing because I was sitting there and we're all having drinks and hanging out with all these people. And
he's the most recognizable guy in the room.
Well, yeah, I had everything going on there, follically, and it was amazing. It was like the party in the Red Sea because he, with all due respect to Diego, he's very small, and he came into the establishment, and it was just like this huge parting as he made his way toward me, which was a wonderful moment because as a player that I had grown up watching, and for him to actually be there and to know who I was and to ask for my jersey was pretty cool.
It's a pretty good honor. Also, we should note we're here in Midtown Manhattan. You're a Rutgers guy. You're kind of a local product. Yes. Even though you grew up in Michigan, live in Los Angeles, you're kind of a local.
I'm an adopted son for New Jersey. I grew up in Detroit, and I had never been to Exit 9 off the New Jersey Turnpike, let alone to New Jersey. And I tell you what, it was like another world coming from the Midwest and coming from Detroit. And it took me a long time to deal with New Jersey and with the people. And I kept my mouth shut literally for the first 3 months of college. I didn't say a word to anybody, and I scared the crap out of my teammates, which was actually good because they didn't want to go anywhere near me, but they knew that I was just a little crazy, and so I got to start and I got to play. And from a soccer perspective, it was great because Rutgers was Division I, and they were going through this rebuilding year. I'll tell you a real quick Rutgers story. Like I said, I grew up in Detroit, and I got rejected everywhere. And Detroit certainly wasn't a soccer hotbed. And so me and my dad, he was panicking. This kid's not going to get into any school or anything like that. And he called up the Rutgers coach and said, I have this kid. He's 6'4". He's done this, and this soccer-wise, and these are his horrible SAT scores. And the coach was like, fine, whatever. Can you drive out? We jumped in the car. We drove 16 hours out to New Brunswick. And he took a look at me and said, well, I can invite you to preseason, and I can help you get into the agriculture school. And I grew up in Michigan, but I sure as hell didn't grow up on a farm, all right? But that was the best thing I had going. And so for the first couple of semesters, I swear to God, I took beef and sheep production. It was the most amazing thing ever. And, it was my introduction to New Jersey. It was my introduction to agriculture and all of these things. But I ended up being an English major and getting out of the ag school. But it was not. I did everything wrong in terms of picking a school that you tell kids, don't do this, don't do this. I'd never been there, knew nothing about the school, and just took a chance. And sometimes those chances work out.
Very nice, very nice. You go into international competition, and you get catapulted into a certain soccer status. And then it's the age-old question of what does a soccer player do professionally? How do you turn this great experience into a business, which is exactly what it became? And you chose an interesting path, and I want to make sure I pronounce this correctly, but you played for Padova of Serie A. Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you very much, Andrew. But you went into one of the more prestigious leagues, but you're nowhere near home. What was that like?
It was, you go where the opportunities are. And in 1994, after the World Cup, I lived the power of what a World Cup can do to an individual. And this summer, when we're watching the World Cup, we'll talk about all the stars. But I think the great part about a World Cup is that there's people that we don't even necessarily talk about right now that are going to emerge on this stage, and we'll be talking about them in terms of being world-class stars. It's just a great coming out party for people, and I lived that power, and gave me all sorts of opportunities, all sorts of doors open. And so I went to Italy, and I played for a small town called Padova, which is in the north of Italy, and they just come into Serie A. And although we talk about the English Premier League now as the be-all and end-all, because all the money and all the players and all the prestige is there, back in the early 90s and mid-90s, it was all about Italy and Serie A over there. So for me, to go over there and every week to play against the best players was incredible, and the best teams. But it all came because of that World Cup experience.
It's amazing, prestigious thing, but it is miles away. And then you trained with Arsenal.
A couple years before that. This is how different, and perception in sports is very, very important. A couple years before, I actually went and played in Serie A and did the good things in the World Cup in '94. I was on a trial at Arsenal training with them, and they wanted nothing to do with me at that point. But things change. You go back and you have these moments and these opportunities that you take. And in the summer of '94, everything changed for me because I was seen by 1 billion people doing it on the world stage.
I asked you about Arsenal specifically. I have some relatives from England who are the diehard Arsenal fans, and they spent an evening trying to explain. Think about the most passionate, and I don't even say Yankee fans, because this would be the Red Sox. The movie Fever Pitch actually was a book, and the book was actually not about the Boston Red Sox. It was about Arsenal, the incredible fan base that Arsenal has. It is literally, it's beyond anything I can comprehend. And they said that kind of fan base, just being part of that, trumps anything that in the United States. To be part of an organization that has that passionate a fan base, what kind of experience is that like?
I mean, look, people ask me all the time to explain the difference between what it is to be a fan or a supporter, whatever you want to call it, of sports in the United States as opposed to being a fan or supporter of soccer or anywhere else in the world. And I'm going to take Italy just for example. There's two things that happen in Italy on Sunday. You go to church and you go to soccer, and it's no coincidence because it is a form of religion. There's a form of respect when you're talking about soccer, and it's not that they don't wear their colors or anything like that, but it permeates everything that they do over there. It's how they relate to each other. It's how they dress. It's how they talk. It's how they act. It's where they live. It's what they do, who they support, and the sport of soccer or football, whatever you want to call it over there. That's how important it is to them. And it's not a passing fancy. It's not. Yes, there's a drinking culture behind it in some places.
If that's what you like.
Yeah, I mean, but there's also it's part of who you are, and it's different than what we think of over here.
Well, you raise an interesting discussion because we talk about international competitions all the time, and I, for one, do not support the World Baseball Classic, and I'll explain why. The World Baseball Classic it asks Major League Baseball players to come in, and they basically will sacrifice spring training, especially pitchers, will sacrifice spring training. So I would contend that a fan, and how many Yankee fans we have here? You a lot of Yankee fans? Met fans? Met fans? All right. I would imagine if you're a Yankee fan, you care more about Derek Jeter winning the World Series than you care about the United States winning the World Baseball Classic. In this circumstance, you have these diehard fan base. Let's use Arsenal as the example because you train there. If you're an Arsenal fan, what's more important, for them to win the English League or for England to do well against the United States in the World Cup?
I think the World Cup trumps everything. Now, if you're the coach of Arsenal, I mean, your responsibility is to get Arsenal to win, and that's what Arsene Wenger has to do. But I think when you talk about the World Cup, being a World Cup champion, what it does to the sport over there and what it does to the culture is something phenomenal. And yes, you have your affiliation within the country if you're an Arsenal supporter, if you're a Chelsea supporter, but all of those people will be supporting their team, whether it's in England or anywhere else. I mean, the World Cup, to win a World Cup and what it does and what it means to the people of that country is something incredible. And we don't have it over here in the United States when it comes to those other sports.
But I think it's fascinating for people here in the audience to see that essentially the World Cup would trump anything going on in the baseball series, the NBA finals or anything like that, that the international competition and the soccer level is that big. Let's talk quickly before we get into the World Cup about some of your post-playing career, obviously now here at ESPN, but you were the general manager of the MetroStars. How did you get in the front office, and how did you get back to New York with the MetroStars?
In 2003, I retired, and I walked into a room like most athletes do, and coach said, "Well, it's just not going to work." And you walk out of that room and you say, "Well, what am I going to do?" I was really, really lucky to be offered the opportunity to be a general manager of 3 different teams. I started out in San Jose with the Earthquakes, came here and was with the MetroStars as they turned into the Red Bulls, and then went back to the Galaxy. And I learned so much about the game that I didn't know, because you're kind of insulated as a player and you don't recognize the business. But it was an incredible education for me, and something I don't regret for a second.
Well, then let me ask you this. Then before we get into the actual executive question, you played at the end of your playing career. You played in Major League Soccer, and what I didn't want this to be was, I didn't want this to be a should it or shouldn't, or I don't want soccer fans to be having to prove the worth of their league. What did you learn about Major League Soccer? How did it become a part of your life? And how do you possibly put it in context to the international experiences that you had?
It's completely different. And yet there was, I came back with a group of players when the league started in '96, and it's, to this day, it's one of the proudest moments of my life was when we started in 1996. And from a personal perspective, maybe I could have gone different ways and had some success here and made some more money here. But it was always important, as corny as it may sound, to be a part of it and to be able to look back when we're old and gray and say, you know what, we came back, we were part of this thing that has survived, and more importantly, has started to thrive. That was important to me, and important to the generation that we saw come up in the '90 and '94 World Cup teams.
You mentioned the MetroStars changing to the Red Bulls, and locally they now have their own stadium, which is a beautiful facility. What was that organization like? What was it? What kind of a change in it, and how does it overall affect the health of the New York franchise here in the MLS?
I mean, you got to have a good box to put something in, right? And even with a nice box, it tends to, the perception of what's inside tends to grow. But the reality is that it's been a horrible box, with all due respect to the Meadowlands, for so many years over there. And we struggled when we were there as players, and then when I was in management, it was difficult to sell tickets and to get people out there. If any of you have been over, you know what I'm talking about, and if you haven't, you really should get over and check out the new Red Bull Arena, because it is a whole nother level, not just in soccer, but in terms of sports and what they've done there. It's easy to get to. You can take the PATH train right from Manhattan, so it's accessible, and it's what we've always talked about. It is a true soccer stadium.
It really is. It's a magnificent building, and you're absolutely right. One last executive question, then we'll get into the World Cup. You were the general manager of the Galaxy when the Galaxy signed David Beckham. Take us through that experience. He's a star that transcends sports. I mean, he was Michael Jordan in soccer. What was it like? What was the recruitment process like, and how did it all come about?
I was real lucky to be a part of the Anschutz Entertainment Group, which owns the Galaxy, and there came a point where the MLS teams were given the opportunity to spend some money and to go out and to do some things. And my boss, Tim Lewicki, who's been involved in sports and entertainment for a long time, said, "Listen, if we're going to do something, let's do something big." And you can't get any bigger than David Beckham. And the decision to bring him cost a lot of money, but we look for, whether you're selling soccer or soap, you're looking for these platforms, these moments from which you can spring. In 1994, we had one with the World Cup here, which basically established Major League Soccer. And when David Beckham came to the league, the amount of focus and attention that he brought, not just to the Galaxy, but to MLS and to the sport itself, you can't calculate that. I mean, it's pretty incredible, and the franchise value of the Galaxy increased dramatically. The perception of the Galaxy, the relevancy of the Galaxy in Los Angeles increased. So it was a crazy time, a lot of nutty things going on and off the field. But looking back on it, it was certainly the right thing to do, and I think still has had a lasting effect.
Was there an unfair expectation on Beckham?
No, he's the most famous player in the world. The attention that he brings is something that he courts, and that's not. I'm not saying that in a bad sense. It's just part of who he is, and it's part of what we bought when we brought him here. As far as him being a soccer player, soccer's a very different game. You can't just one great player does not make a team, and we found out that, especially in Major League Soccer, where there's so much parity, he is a great player. But he has to have good players around him, and I think the Galaxy has gotten it right now on the field, and they're cruising right now. But I also think it showed people that perception and reality are different things. And as good as he is, there's some very, very good American soccer players that might not be married to a Spice Girl, or might not be making hundreds of millions of dollars a year. But if you look at them from a soccer perspective, I think that they could have success anywhere in the world.
I specifically avoided Spice Girl.
I always bring it up.
I was not going to go Spice Girl, but you went there. For those of you watching on ESPNNewYork.com, this is Lunch with a Legend with Alexi Lalas. I'm Seth Everett, and we're here at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan. All right, so the World Cup is coming up, and I want to ask two sets of questions. The soccer fans' questions, and then I want to recruit soccer fans. So I'll start it off with, what is the expectation for the fan here in the United States that's going to say, okay, I understand there's this big tournament going on. How's the United States going to do?
Yeah, I think it's important for people that are just coming to this sport and this tournament right now to be realistic, but also to have some raised expectations. The fact is that the group that the U.S. has drawn in this World Cup is the easiest group that they've had. It doesn't mean they can't lose to every single team, whether it's England, Algeria, or Slovenia. But the reality is, when you put it up against other groups that they've had, this team should come out of this group. And if this team does not come out of this group, not only is it a disappointment, but it's a failure. And that's not a dangerous thing to say, because, like I said, there was a time when nobody cared. And with our success on and off the field in terms of this sport in the United States has come higher expectations, and that's a good thing. The fact that these players are playing under higher pressure and higher expectations, that's a good thing, and it shows how far our sport has come.
Is it a good thing for the team to face off against arguably the best team in the group, England, in the very first matchup?
I don't mind it, because I think our team always plays well when they're the underdogs. And while for most of the world this is going to look like a David and Goliath type of situation, I think the reality is that if and when the U.S. beats England in that first game,
there we go.
It's going to go around the world as this incredible shock. For me, it's not going to be that surprising, because I think we have the individuals, and I think collectively Bob Bradley has put together a team that can play against the best in the world. And I'm sorry, England, they're good, but I think that they think that they're much better than they are, and I think that people don't give the U.S. Enough credit. So I think the U.S. is in a very good position being those underdogs, and they're playing against an England team that is very, very good, but not as good as people think. So, I think that that's a great opportunity either to get 3 points for a win, or even to come out with 1 point with a tie.
If you can come out with that and see that other matchup, they would be the favorites in the other two games that they would be scheduled to play. Yeah. So in essence, you can lose the game one and still advance to the
yeah. Nobody freak out. I mean, look, if they win, incredible. If they get 1 point, that's a solid performance, and I think everybody thinks that that's doable. If they lose, it's certainly not over, because we've said all along, look, if we're going to the World Cup and we can't beat the likes of Algeria and Slovenia, then the fact is we don't deserve to be there. Now, having said that, somewhere around the world in Algeria and Slovenia, they're having a lunch like this, right? I don't know what the equivalent of Ruth's Chris is over there, but there's two guys sitting there, and they're saying the exact same thing. They're saying, listen, if we can't beat the U.S., then we don't deserve to be there. So this is the situation right now, and it's with what the U.S. has, I believe that these two teams are teams that we should beat, and that's what the expectation is. But I think that it is an easy group, and I can't wait to see what happens.
I really want to track the ESPNNewYork.com numbers from Slovenia right now. I want to know who from Slovenia is watching this. Last year, the team played in the Confederations Cup, which took place in South Africa and beat teams like the likes of Spain. How much does that benefit the United States team, given the fact that they've played in the facility and been in that atmosphere in South Africa?
It's great because they played in all the stadiums that they're playing, and they played in the climate. And for people that don't know, I think one of the interesting things about this World Cup, as opposed to other World Cups, is the climate, because it's going to be very mild and at times even cold in games, and that's, I think, benefits a lot of European teams. So, but having said all that, nobody cares what happened in the summer of 2009 if it doesn't go well in the summer of 2010. So I think it was important for them to be over there and to experience success and to experience on and off the field what South Africa is like. And that's, I think, something that they can use as a touchstone. But the most important thing is what happens in the summer of 2010.
You keep referencing this form of pressure, and I have a feeling that I don't even know if we're doing it justice. How much pressure is on Bob Bradley to make sure that this team at the very least advances?
I mean, I think that's ultimately what he'll be judged on. And it's not that you don't have perspective and you don't recognize that things can happen. But this is the World Cup. And look, any type of pressure that Bob Bradley is on is absolutely nothing compared to a Fabio Capella or other coaches over there. And that's just the culture that we live in. And I'm not putting undue pressure on him or the team. I truly believe that this is where we should be. And I also believe that we have the players now that can handle that type of pressure. I mean, can you imagine the type of pressure that England players are on when they're playing against a team like the United States?
Imagine.
I mean, it's a foregone conclusion in a lot of England fans' mind that this is a win for them. They get 3 points and they're off to the races.
From what you're saying, it feels like the United States versus the Soviets in 1980 in hockey.
That's what it feels like. To a certain extent. I think people that have followed the game recognize that the U.S. is certainly not a guaranteed 3 points for anybody in the world, and they've certainly progressed. But at the World Cup level, and especially with this England team, because listen, every 4 years, everybody believes that the England team is great, especially the English. But I think that they're very well coached. I think tactically they have an understanding of what Fabio Capello wants to do. But when you look at Wayne Rooney, I would hate for Wayne Rooney to slip on the escalator coming down the stairs at the hotel. Because they have absolutely nobody else up there, and they're relying heavily on him. And he's a great player, and I don't wish that on anybody, and certainly not on Wayne Rooney.
Well. Let me ask you this. Given the pressure it goes in, it almost as if the United States couldn't put Charlie Davies on the roster. For those of you who don't know, Charlie Davies is a great player for Team USA. He gets into a car accident, and he's close. If the World Cup was in September, there'd be a better chance of him being able to perform. How tough a decision was that for USA?
I don't think it was a difficult decision. From a personal perspective, obviously it was. But from a practical perspective, I mean, he just can't do it. And this is the World Cup. And you need players, especially, Bob Bradley needs all those bullets. And if one of them isn't 100%, it's difficult. From a practical perspective, the problem about not having a Charlie Davies is that he was the one person that could stretch a defense. He's the one person with the type of speed up top that could put fear into defenders. And I put Charlie Davies up against a John Terry in a foot race any day. And the only other person on the team is a Landon Donovan. And so what ends up happening is Landon Donovan has played consistently well in the midfield, and we finally found a place for him. And the tendency is to say, oh, well, let's put him up. But once you start moving those pieces around, it's a problem. So right now, who is going to play up top with Josie Altidore for the U.S. is a big question, and one of the questions that hopefully is going to be answered in the next couple of weeks here when we see the likes of Edson Buttle and Hercules Gomez and these forwards that are all vying not just for a position on the team, but possibly a starting position. Although I think Clint Dempsey is ultimately going to be, at least for the start of the game, be put up top with Josie Altidore. And
Clint Dempsey's moving a position, so like you said, it's shuffling pieces. Other candidates, Eddie Johnson. What about obviously the new kid, Robbie Findlay? Is it possible we see somebody that we're not expecting?
Robbie Finley's the only guy with the type of speed that we're talking about. Unfortunately, he's been given a bunch of opportunities, and he has yet to show that he can harness that speed. And in soccer, there's plenty of fast guys out there, but to be able to use it correctly, to be able to pick and choose your moments, to get behind the defenses, and to use that speed is a totally different thing.
Sell me on 2 strikers versus 1.
I just like having 2 up there. I also think mentally having 1 guy up there is difficult for the 1 guy up there, and it's difficult for your team because it almost puts you into a defensive posture right away. And I think it's very, very difficult to go out there and to believe that you're going to attack and not just bunker it in when you're only playing with 1 forward.
Do you think Jozy Altidore is a striker that we're talking about, and a lot of fans look for offense, and he's a guy that you always point to for offense. Is he up to the challenge if they can't find a guy, or if the guy that they decide to put up there in the striker position isn't up to task? Is he going to be able to compensate that? How tough could this decision backfire for Bob Bradley?
It's interesting because, we talk about Jozy Altidore, and, he's a 20-year-old, still very unexperienced type of player, and yet we talk about him in the sense that he's the starting player and he's got all this experience.
He played in England.
He has. He's played over in England. He didn't, he scored 1 goal in the time that he was over there. So I think that there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure on Jozy. And for those of you that don't know, Jozy started out in Major League Soccer, actually started out right here with the Metro Stars and was one of the highest in terms of paid money transfers that MLS, the highest paid transfer, and has gone over to Europe. The interesting thing about Jozy and why he is so sought after is because he has this incredible body. Yes, he has some skill and to a certain extent some speed, but he has this body. And once he learns how to use it, we saw a little bit of that last summer where he's posting up and using that body and banging up top, I think he'll be a force to reckon with.
What did you make of Carlos Bocanegra getting named team captain?
I think Carlos is a good team captain. He understands what's expected of him individually. The interesting stuff that came out about Carlos Bocanegra literally over the past couple of days is that he had surgery on his groin a couple of weeks ago. And this was something that nobody knew about. And here's the captain of your team who's had surgery. And there's a lot of injury questions with this team, with Oguchi Onyewu, who's been out for a long time, coming back in. Stuart Holden, who's coming back from an injury. Ricardo Clark, who's coming back from an injury. And all these different...
Demerit also,
Jay Demerit has depth perception. And I don't know how that works as a defender.
I hear that's important in soccer.
Yeah, they asked him the other day, and he's possibly going to be one of the starting marking backs, center backs for the U.S. team. And he said he has some problems with depth, and I just have this nightmare of him thinking that he's really close to Wayne Rooney. In reality, he's not so close, and and not being able to get to him. I mean, and I actually picked Demerit as one of the players that could possibly come out and really star because of his gritty ability. And you give him a job to do, like mark a Wayne Rooney or mark somebody, and I think he has the ability to do that.
Do you get the sense that this team being as young as they are, is it possible they're too young for the discipline that this thing takes?
I think that there's a little bit of a lack of senior leadership, but we also have to recognize the fact that some of these young players started out so young that they're coming into their 2nd World Cup. We talk about Landon Donovan who's coming into his 3rd World Cup, and he's still not even 30. And so this is a situation where I think we bloodied a lot of those young guys early, and hopefully we reap those benefits now.
I'm very curious how you're going to handle this on ESPN. The United States' first game is against England, and they've been torn apart by scandal. I want to tell our audience here, Wayne Bridge and John Terry are teammates on the Chelsea team. They're both on the England national team. Well, bottom line is John Terry hooked up with Wayne Bridge's girlfriend. The two get into a fight. John Terry stripped of his captaincy, and Wayne Bridge quit the national team. I can't imagine something like this affecting a team, and this is something A-Rod should probably pay attention to. I went there. That's okay. How does this affect Team England?
Listen, I'm not in the camp, but I can imagine that there's some grumbling. I will say this: you're not always best friends with the players that you play with. It's great to be a good group and all that kind of stuff, but especially.
But does that affect team chemistry?
You know what? I think the most important thing. I'm only speaking for myself. All I cared about. I didn't care what you were doing. I didn't care who you were sleeping with. I didn't care who you were married to. I didn't care what you were doing off the field. As long as you could do it, and by being there, you could help us win games, That's all I cared about. It's all fine and well to be surrounded by friends and a great group, but the reality is that doesn't happen all the time. And at the World Cup level, I just wanted to be with people that I knew could help. And if John Terry believes that that this is a player who can help, he can deal with it. If the player can't deal with it, that's up to him. And I'm not in his shoes, and I don't know how he feels ultimately in his heart. But for me, it would be very difficult to say I'm not going to the World Cup. I'm not going to do it. You kind of put it away and you just say, look, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to help my country and I'm going to win soccer games. I mean, look, if we looked at athletes and we threw out all the ones that were bastards, we wouldn't have a lot of guys out there. We wouldn't have a lot of sports.
You have to rethink the size of the field.
Yeah.
All right, I have two more for you, and then I want to let other folks, if you guys have a question for Alexi here, we can take a couple of questions from the audience. South Africa as the host country, I was taken aback by a couple of comments that some of the organizers had said that they didn't want the United States to advance because they were concerned about security if Barack Obama decided to go see the team play. If you're going to say that there are security concerns, then I'm allowed to be concerned with whether or not they should be the host country. What do you make of South Africa and how they're going to handle this whole thing?
A World Cup is obviously an advertisement, not just for the sport, but for the country. And this is what's so amazing about going to the African continent and specifically to South Africa, because there's so much riding on it. And hopefully it's a celebration of that continent and of that country because of what they have been able to bring to the sport for so many years in terms of the players, in terms of the teams that they have. Yeah, there's questions, and I'm sure there's things that aren't going to go right. But ultimately, FIFA has a tremendous amount vested in this, and as does South Africa. And so, I believe that they're going to do what they need to do. If you're a security person, obviously you're going to hedge your bets, and if you really ask the question and you want to answer honestly, who gives you the biggest headaches? Barack Obama coming into a situation from a security perspective, yeah, that gives you the biggest headache. So you're going to say, this is not something that we want to do. So I think it was much more in terms of a security statement as opposed to a footballing statement.
That's fair. If you get the sense now that you're going down there and we're all going to be tuned in, all the games, I should also mention, at least the United States games are going to be on 1050, ESPN New York, as well as ESPN Television. Realistically, how far can the United States go?
They can get out of their group, and then if they play against a team like Germany, let's say there's a possibility they come up against Germany. I think first off they look back at what they did in 2002 and they recognize that when it's a knockout phase and it's just one game, anything can happen. I think they have to get out of their group. And then to a certain extent, the rest is gravy. Although I can foresee me sitting in South Africa and they get out of their group and they come up against whoever it ends up being, a Germany or a Serbia or something like that, and saying, hey, we got to beat them. We got to beat them. So it might change when you get there, but certainly get out of the group and make sure that you have a respectable performance against whoever that is.
And the impact that would have here in the United States?
I mean, look, folks, if the U.S. doesn't get out of their group, Major League Soccer isn't going anywhere, American soccer isn't going anywhere. We're too far along for that to happen. But we see every 4 years this platform that comes along from which we can use to increase awareness and to increase the popularity of our league and of our sport. And we don't want to waste that. So it would hurt. It wouldn't be the end of the world, but when you have an opportunity where everybody, even last summer during the Confederations Cup, people were into it that weren't necessarily into soccer because the U.S. was advancing, they were winning, they were beating big teams, and people got into it. And I hope that we have that type of reaction when people are watching the World Cup this summer with regards to the U.S.
And lastly, Spain, Brazil, they're the favorites. Am I going on a limb? You want to pick a winner?
You're not going out on a limb. I mean, it's Spain,
the
Brazil.
Favorites.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm not going to say Spain or Brazil. It's Lunch with a Legend with Alexi Lalas. Here.
Well, you know what? As I've told everybody, if we go to Vegas, and we bet on Spain or Brazil, we're going to win like a little bit of money. But we want to win a lot of money, right? Because we want to have a good time at Vegas.
Yes, we will be.
So you start thinking about some teams like your Netherlands or your Serbia for a dark horse. I love my Greeks. Germany, which isn't necessarily a dark horse because of the incredible pedigree that they have. I do believe that European teams, like I said, because of the climate, are going to benefit from that. Even with the loss of Ballack, Michael Bauk, the captain of Germany, went down a few weeks ago, and he's not going to be available for them. Sometimes when you lose a player like that, I mean, this is like losing your quarterback before the playoffs. And sometimes when that happens, you have a guy come in who doesn't necessarily come in and replace him
right.
Individually, but everybody kind of picks up the slack, and it becomes much more of a team. And I would see, a German team that possibly could use the loss of Ballack in a positive way, even though he's such an incredible presence on the field for that team.
Alexi, this has been a lot of fun. Thank
you very much. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.
Does anybody want to chime in? Anybody have some questions? We can take a couple of questions. Let's go in the back there. Just speak up, though.
Tell us what to look for tomorrow night against the Czechs. Is this a situation where everyone's just solidifying their existing roles, or is Bradley still experimenting?
There's a question about the game tomorrow night, the U.S. warm-up game against the Czech Republic. I think that this is I think Bob Bradley has his 23 already. I think most teams and most coaches already have their 23. I think this is an opportunity for him to see how guys, especially up top, function. Guys, as I said, like Hercules Gomez and Edson Buttle. I mean, literally, this is an opportunity for them to show, and they have to show well. I think Edson Buttle has a better chance of going to the World Cup than any of them. I think if he, unless he trips over his feet or something like that, he's got a really good chance of going. I'm really interested to see how Hercules Gomez comes in, because this is a situation where a player's been playing down in Mexico in a substitution role. And that might actually benefit him, because regardless of who Bob Bradley picks for part of the strike force up top, he might be looking at a substitution type of situation, and a substitute has a different mentality than a starter. And so if Hercules Gomez can come in and really just kind of buzz around the way he does, because he's very, very fast and very, very quick, and really show that he can come in and provide that spark that you need sometimes off the bench, I think you could be looking at a Hercules Gomez. So I wouldn't expect a lot of players, the usual suspects like Landon Donovan, to play the full game or anything like that. Bob Bradley really has to give these guys that he's brought in an opportunity. He brought in 30 players. 7 of them are going to go home no matter what. And he has to give them the opportunity right down to the end to make an impression. And it's not easy when you have one game to do something like that.
What about on this side of the room? Why don't we go all the way in the back in the corner there? You.
The question was, who would I invite to camp that Bob Bradley didn't, and who the starting midfielders would be? I'll take the second question first. I lobbied, in my own little way, nobody listens to me, but I lobbied anyway, for Brian McBride to actually be brought into camp. When they were talking about different forwards to actually, and I'm not all about going back to the past, but I just believe that because of the injuries, because of the fact that we lack some of that leadership and that experience, that a Brian McBride would be an interesting choice. He's been there. He's scored in World Cups. He knows what it is. He's not going to come into the locker room and create a problem. He's going to provide some of that leadership. He'll accept the role of coming off the bench. And look, if you're down a goal and you need a guy that's good in the air to come into the game and to mix it up in there, I think he's definitely a good option. Doesn't have the speed of some of the other players, but that would be one player that I would have liked to see in camp. And it's unfortunate that he didn't get brought in. But and then the other question was in the midfield. Right now I think you're looking at a situation where in the past it's been Michael Bradley. I think Michael Bradley is a starter no matter what. And as he should be. He's been there since the start. I think the question is who's going to pair up with him, and it's been Ricardo Clark at times. The interesting thing about the U.S. right now in the midfield is that there's two players that kind of play the same way in Ricardo Clark and Michael Bradley. They're not really attacking players. They're much more defensive players, and that's tactically how Bob Bradley likes to do it. And other teams have a much more attacking player who's kind of ahead of the defensive player. I don't know who he's going to play in the midfield, to be quite honest with you. I think we're going to see some interesting things in these next 2 games in the midfield in terms of who pairs with Michael Bradley. But I think Michael Bradley is assured a position. You got a possibility of a Benny Feilhaber. You have a possibility of even playing with one guy up top, as we talked about, and bringing 5 people into the midfield. I don't know who he's going to play.
Alexi, we had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for doing this. Good luck in South Africa.
Thank you.
With all the coverage, we'll be watching, and you'll be hopefully on the radio station a bunch of times, and we look forward to it. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks, man.
It's going to be a good summer.
Thank you so much for coming. Want to thank our folks, our sponsors, Emblem Health, Brooklyn Brewery, and of course Ruth's Chris Steakhouse for coming and being a participating sponsor today. For Alexi, Lalas, I'm Seth Everett. This has been Lunch with a Legend on ESPNNewYork.com and of course 1050 ESPN New York. Enjoy your afternoon, everybody.